Commander Jake Martinez pressed his face against the cold glass of the observation deck. The stars looked different today. They seemed to shimmer and dance in ways that made his stomach turn. He had been watching space for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this. "Sir, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Sam Cooper from the communications station. His voice cracked like a teenager asking a girl to dance. Jake turned away from the window and walked across the bridge of the UES Defender. The main screen showed empty space. Then it showed something that made Jake's blood run cold. Ships began to appear out of nowhere. Not one or two ships, but hundreds of them. They were massive, each one bigger than anything humans had ever built. The ships looked like they were made of crystal and metal twisted together by some alien mind. "How many?" Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Still counting, sir. We're at 400 and rising." Sam's fingers moved across his controls like he was playing a piano. "They're not stopping, Commander. More keep coming." Jake watched the alien fleet grow larger and larger. Each ship was beautiful in a terrible way. They glowed with soft blue light, and their surfaces seemed to move like water. But Jake knew these were not peaceful visitors. "You did not bring 1,000 warships to make friends, Admiral Lisa." Bennett's voice crackled through the comm system from Earth Defense Command. "All ships, this is Admiral Bennett. We are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet. Patching it through now." The main screen changed. Jake found himself looking at something that might have been a face. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its skin was pale blue and seemed to glow from within. When it spoke, its voice was like music played too slow. "I am Emperor Zakthur of the Valyrian Empire. Your species will surrender? Immediately, you will open your worlds to our rule. You will serve the Empire as others have served before you." Jake felt his hands ball into fists. The alien continued speaking as if it were reading a grocery list. "We have conquered 17 star systems. We have never known defeat. Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your small minds cannot understand our technology. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake looked around at his crew. They were all young, most of them barely out of the academy. They were looking at him, like he might have answers. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from the science station, "I'm reading their weapon signatures. The power output is unlike anything we've ever seen. A single shot from one of their main guns could crack a moon in half." Jake nodded. He had expected as much. "What about their numbers?" "Final count is just over 3,000 ships, sir. They're arranged in a perfect formation around our solar system. They've cut off all escape routes." Captain Roy Davis appeared on the comm screen. He was calling from the U's Patriot, one of Earth's most powerful warships. Roy had fought in every major conflict for the past 30 years. If anyone could figure out how to fight these aliens, it would be him. "Jake, are you seeing this? They've, got us surrounded, but something doesn't feel right about this whole situation." "What do you mean, Roy?" "Look at how they're positioned. It's too perfect, too neat. They're not acting like conquerors, they're acting like administrators. Like they're here to file paperwork, not fight a war." Jake studied the alien formation again. Roy was right. The ships were arranged in precise geometric patterns. There were no scouts, no advanced units, no signs of tactical thinking. They had simply arrived and demanded surrender. President Helen Carter's voice came over the emergency channel. "This is President Carter speaking to all military personnel. We are convening an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. All senior officers report to your stations and await further orders." Jake knew what that meant. The politicians would argue for hours while the aliens waited. Meanwhile, his job was to keep his ship ready for whatever came next. "Commander," said Sam from the communications station, "we're getting reports from other ships. The aliens are broadcasting the same message to everyone." "Word for word, exactly." "The same. What kind of message?" "Technical specifications, sir. They're telling us about their previous conquests. The Thraxian Confederacy, the Melkan Republic, something called the Zephyrian Alliance. They're listing how long each one took to defeat. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How long? The longest was 6 days, sir. Most of them surrendered. After the first demonstration of Valyrian firepower, Lieutenant Foster looked up from her station. Sir, I've been analyzing their previous battles based on the data they're broadcasting. It's strange. Every single conquest followed the same pattern. The Valyrians would arrive, demonstrate their superior technology, and the enemy would surrender immediately. That's not how humans fight, said Jake. No, sir, it's not. But I don't think they know that. Jake walked back to the observation window. The alien fleet hung in space like a collection of deadly jewels. Each ship was a work of art, but they were arranged like pieces on a chessboard. There was no creativity, no adaptability in their formation. Sir? Called Sam. Intelligence officer. Nick Stone is requesting to speak with you. He says it's urgent. Jake accepted the connection. Nick's weathered face appeared on the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Jake, I've been studying their transmissions. There's something you need to know. These aliens have never fought a real war. What do you mean? Every species they've conquered gave up after seeing their technology. They've never faced an enemy that fought back. They don't know what to do with opponents who refuse to surrender. Jake felt something stir in his chest. It was not hope, not yet, but it was something. They're treating this like a business transaction, Nick continued. Show up, demand surrender, collect new subjects. They've never had to actually fight anyone. What? About their weapons? Oh, they're real enough. They could destroy our entire fleet without breaking a sweat. But they're not warriors, Jake. They're administrators with really big guns. Jake thought about this. The aliens had surrounded Earth with overwhelming force. They had weapons that could destroy planets. But they were expecting humans to behave like every other species they had encountered. Sir, said Lieutenant Foster, I've been looking at the historical records they transmitted. Every species they conquered had the same response pattern. First contact, demonstration of power, immediate surrender. They've never had to fight a siege. They've never had to deal with guerrilla warfare. They've never faced an enemy that would rather die than give up. Jake smiled for the first time since the aliens had arrived. They have no idea what they're dealing with. No, sir, they don't. The question is, do we tell them? Jake looked out at the alien fleet again. 3,000 ships, each one capable of destroying his vessel with a single shot. But they were expecting humans to act like every other species in the galaxy. They were expecting logic, reason, and self-preservation to govern human behavior. They were about to learn that humans were different, very different. Get me a channel to the Valyrian flagship, Jake said. I think it's time we had a conversation with Emperor Zakthar. The comm officer's hands moved across his controls. Channel open, sir. Jake straightened his uniform and looked directly into the camera. He was about to deliver a message that would change everything. Emperor Zakthar, this is Commander Jake Martinez of the United Earth Space Force. We received your demands for surrender. We have a response for you. The alien Emperor's face appeared on the screen, all 4 eyes focused on Jake with what might have been curiosity. We're not surrendering. Jake said simply, we came here to warn you. Leave now, while you still can. General Scott Turner adjusted his dress uniform one last time before stepping into the transport shuttle. The small craft would carry him and his team to the Valyrian flagship, a massive ship that hung in space like a crystal cathedral. Scott had been a soldier for 30 years, but he had never been more nervous than he was right now. Colonel Beth Williams sat across from him, checking her weapon for the 5th time. She was not supposed to need it during a diplomatic mission, but Beth had learned long ago that peace talks could turn violent in a heartbeat. Beside her, Tony Rogers shuffled through his notes about alien culture and customs. Remember, Scott said to his team, we're not here to surrender. We're here to give them one last chance to leave peacefully. The shuttle docked with the alien ship with a soft thud. The airlock opened, and Scott got his first look at Valyrian technology up close. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The corridors were too tall for humans, designed for beings much larger than Earth's people. 4 Valyrian guards met them at the airlock. Each alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that glowed like moonlight. They wore armor that looked like it had been grown rather than built. The guards said nothing, simply gestured for the humans to follow. They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Scott noticed that everything was perfectly clean and organized. There were no signs of wear, no scratches on the walls, no evidence that this ship had ever seen battle. It was like walking through a museum. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, and the walls were covered in images that moved like living photographs. At the center of the room sat Emperor Zakther on a throne made of what looked like solid light. The Emperor was even more imposing in person than he had been on the screen. His 4 eyes studied the humans with cold intelligence. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber. "You have come to surrender your species to the Valyrian Empire. This is wise. Your suffering will be brief." Scott stepped forward. "We have not come to surrender, Emperor. We have come to warn you." The Emperor's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. Around the throne room, other Valyrian officials made sounds that could have been laughter. "Warn us. You are a primitive species with primitive weapons. What could you possibly warn us about?" "About what you're going to face if you try to conquer humanity," Scott replied. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Admiral Taishkar, the Emperor's military commander, stepped forward. He was even taller than the Emperor, with scars across his glowing skin that marked him as a veteran of many campaigns. "We have conquered 17 star systems," Taishkar said. "We have never known defeat. We have weapons that can destroy your entire world with a single shot. What could your species possibly do to threaten us?" Beth Williams spoke up for the first time. "You've never fought humans before. And what makes humans different from the Thraxians or the Melkans?" The Emperor asked. Tony Rogers opened his datapad and began to read. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. The city was completely surrounded, just like Earth is now. The people inside were starving, freezing, and dying from disease. Any rational species would have surrendered in the first week. The Valyrian officials listened with growing confusion. The humans inside the city ate wallpaper paste to survive. Tony continued. They burned furniture to stay warm. They watched their children die of hunger. And they never surrendered. Not once in 872 days. Emperor Zakthar's eyes narrowed. "That is not logical behavior." "That's exactly right," Scott said. "It's not logical." The Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they were going to die. They knew they could not win. They fought anyway. "Why?" asked Admiral Taishkar. "What purpose does such behavior serve?" "Because sometimes there are things more important than survival," Beth answered. "Sometimes there are things worth dying for." The Emperor stood up from his throne. His massive form towered over the humans, but Scott noticed that he seemed genuinely puzzled rather than angry. "This makes no sense. A species that fights beyond all hope of victory will simply destroy itself. Natural selection should have eliminated such behavior." "It should have," Scott agreed. "But it didn't. Do you know why?" The Emperor waited for an answer. "Because sometimes the crazy ones win. Sometimes refusing to give up when any sane person would surrender is exactly what you need to survive." Tony brought up another historical record on his datapad. The Battle of Stalingrad. The German army was technologically superior, just like your fleet. They had better weapons, better training, and more soldiers. The city should have fallen in weeks. But it didn't, Beth continued. The humans fighting there turned every building into a fortress. They fought for individual rooms, individual staircases. They made the enemy pay for every inch of ground. The battle lasted for months," Tony said. "By the end, German soldiers were having nervous breakdowns from the stress. They called it Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. They had superior technology, but they were fighting an enemy that refused to be defeated. Admiral Taishkar looked uncomfortable. Such tactics are inefficient. They waste resources and personnel. That's the point, Scott said. Efficiency doesn't matter when you're fighting for your survival. Logic doesn't matter when you're fighting for your home. The Emperor walked down from his throne until he was standing directly in front of Scott. His 4 eyes studied the human general with what might have been respect. You are telling me that your species will fight even when defeat is certain. We're telling you that defeat is never certain as long as one human is still breathing, Scott replied. This is madness, said one of the Valyrian officials. Yes, Beth agreed. That's exactly what it is. And that's why you should be afraid. The Emperor walked back to his throne, but he did not sit down. You wish us to believe that your primitive weapons and small numbers can threaten the Valyrian Empire. I want you to understand what you're choosing to fight, Scott said. When you attack Earth, you're not just attacking a planet. You're attacking every human who has ever lived and died for something they believed in. You're fighting the ghosts of every soldier who ever refused to surrender. Tony pulled up another file. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. A few hundred humans with handmade weapons held off the German army for almost a month. They knew they were going to die. They fought anyway. Vietnam, Beth added. American forces had helicopters, jets, and modern weapons. The Vietnamese had rifles and determination. Guess who won? The Emperor's advisors began murmuring among themselves in their musical language. Scott caught words that sounded like irrational and dangerous. Afghanistan, Tony continued. The Soviet Union had tanks and aircraft. The local fighters had old weapons and caves to hide in. The Soviets left after 10 years of fighting. Every time, Scott said. Every single time someone thought they could conquer humans through superior technology alone, they learned the same lesson. Technology wins battles, will wins wars. Emperor Zakthar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before. What you describe is not warfare, it is madness. From your perspective, yes, Scott agreed. From ours, it's Tuesday. The Emperor looked at his advisors, then back at the human delegation. Even if what you say is true, we have weapons that can destroy your entire planet from orbit. We do not need to fight you on the ground. Scott smiled. Emperor, with respect, you still don't understand. If you destroy Earth, you'll have to destroy every human colony, every space station, every mining operation scattered across the galaxy. And even then, the survivors will spend the rest of their lives hunting you down? That is not logical, Admiral Taishkar protested. No, Beth said, it's not logical, it's human. The Emperor sat back down on his throne. For the first time since the humans had arrived, he looked uncertain. You are asking us to retreat from a primitive species based on stories of ancient battles. Asking you to make a choice, Scott said. You can learn from history, or you can become history. The choice is yours. The throne room fell silent. The Emperor's 4 eyes studied each human in turn. We will consider your words, he said finally. But understand this, the Valyrian Empire does not retreat. We have never retreated. We will not begin now, Scott nodded. Then you've made your choice. I hope you're ready for what comes next. As the human delegation was escorted back to their shuttle, Scott could hear the Valyrian officials arguing among themselves. Some seemed to be taking the warning seriously. Others dismissed it as primitive bluffing. Beth leaned over to Scott as they walked. Do you think they'll listen? Scott shook his head. No, they're too proud, and they've never lost before. They can't imagine being defeated by a species they see as primitive. So what happens now? Scott looked back at the massive alien ship one last time. Now we show them what humans are really capable of, and may God help us all. The first shots of the war came at 0347 hours, Earth Standard Time. Sergeant Jim Parker was drinking his morning coffee on the mining station orbiting Kepler 442b when the alarm started screaming. Through the small window of the break room, he could see the Valyrian fleet approaching like a storm cloud made of metal and crystal. All hands to battle stations, came the voice over the intercom. This is not a drill. Jim put down his coffee cup and grabbed his rifle. The mining station had a security force of exactly 12 people. They were facing a Valyrian attack fleet of over 200 ships. Any sane person would have surrendered immediately. Jim was not feeling particularly sane that morning. Listen up, he told his small team as they gathered in the armory. We've got about 15 minutes before they get here. We all know how this is going to end, so let's make it count. Private Eddie Clark, barely 19 years old, raised his hand. Sergeant, shouldn't we evacuate the civilians? Where would they go, son? Those ships have us surrounded. We're all in this together now. The station shook as the first Valyrian shots hit the outer hull. Jim looked around at his team. Most of them were young, fresh out of basic training. They had signed up to guard a mining operation, not to fight an alien invasion. We can't win this fight, Jim said. But we can make them remember it. The Valyrian boarding pods hit the station like massive hammers. Jim watched on the security monitors as alien soldiers poured through the breaches. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They're coming through sections 7 and 12, called out Private Nancy Green from the communications station. Looks like about 50 of them. Right, Jim said. Time to get creative. The mining station was not built for warfare, but it was filled with things that could be turned into weapons. Jim and his team had spent the last 3 weeks preparing for this moment. They had rigged explosive charges throughout the station, turned maintenance tunnels into ambush points, and filled the air vents with poison gas. The first group of Valyrian soldiers entered the main corridor, expecting quick surrender. Instead, they found a maze of death traps. Hidden charges exploded under their feet. Automated guns opened fire from concealed positions. The ceiling collapsed on top of them. Section 7 is clear, reported Private Clark over the radio. They're regrouping. Good, Jim replied. Let them think about it. The Valyrians had never encountered anything like this. Their previous conquests had been clean, efficient affairs. The enemy would see their overwhelming force and surrender within hours. This was different. This was messy, chaotic, and terrifying. Admiral Taishkar watched the battle from his flagship, his 4 eyes wide with confusion. How long should this take? He asked his tactical officer. The station has minimal defenses, sir. We should have secured it within the hour. That was 6 hours ago. The humans were still fighting. Back on the station, Jim's team had been reduced to 8 people. They had lost Private Martinez in Section 12 and Corporal Johnson in the reactor room, but they had taken 23 Valyrian soldiers with them. Sergeant, called Private Green, they're trying to gas us out. Jim looked at the monitors. The aliens were pumping some kind of sleeping gas into the ventilation system. It was a smart tactic. It would disable the humans without damaging the station. Put on your masks, Jim ordered, and activate the backup plan. The backup plan was something Jim had hoped he would never have to use. Hidden throughout the station were charges connected to the main reactor. If the humans were going to lose, they would take the station and anyone on it with them. Are you sure about this, Sergeant? Asked Private Clark. Son, sometimes the only way to win is to make sure the other guy can't win either. The Valyrian assault team reached the command center just as Jim's finger found the detonator. The alien soldiers froze when they saw the device in his hand. Tell your admiral, Jim said to the lead Valyrian, that humans don't surrender. Ever. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away. Meanwhile, in the asteroid belt around Mars, Admiral Karen Hayes was preparing for the largest space battle in human history. Her fleet consisted of 47 ships, ranging from massive dreadnoughts to tiny fighter craft. The Valyrian fleet approaching them numbered over 800 vessels. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes, she broadcast to her fleet. We're outnumbered about 20 to 1. The enemy has better weapons, better armor, and better technology. Any questions? Captain Pete Johnson, commanding the cruiser UES Liberty, responded first. Just one, Admiral. Are we going to make them pay for it? Oh, yes, Karen replied. We're going to make them pay for every single ship they lose today. The battle began when the Valyrian fleet opened fire at maximum range. Their weapons were incredibly accurate, and the first volley destroyed 3 human ships instantly. The logical response would have been to retreat, to preserve what remained of the fleet for a better opportunity. Instead, Karen ordered a full attack. All ships ramming speed. Take as many of them with you as you can. The human fleet charged straight into the alien formation. It was suicide, but it was the kind of suicide that would cost the enemy dearly. Captain Johnson's ship was the first to reach the Valyrian line. The U's Liberty was badly damaged, her engines failing and her weapons offline. Johnson pointed his ship at the largest enemy vessel. He could see and push the engines to overload. The collision tore both ships apart in a ball of fire and twisted metal. "Good work, Pete," Karen whispered. One by one, the human ships followed Johnson's example. Captain Susan Clark rammed her destroyer into a Valyrian cruiser. Commander Tony Rogers detonated his ship's reactor inside an enemy formation, taking out 4 alien vessels at once. The Valyrians had never seen anything like it. Their tactical computers could not process what was happening. Why would a species deliberately destroy their own ships? It made no tactical sense. "Admiral," called Karen's tactical officer, "we're down to 12 ships." "Then we'd better make them count," Karen replied. She looked at the tactical display. The Valyrian fleet was in disarray. They had won the battle, but at a cost they had never expected. They had lost over 100 ships to an enemy that should have been crushed in minutes. "All remaining ships, this is Admiral Hayes, we've done our job." They know what they're fighting now. The last few human ships scattered in different directions, forcing the Valyrians to split their forces to pursue them. It was the final insult. Even in defeat, the humans were making the aliens work for their victory. On Europa Station, Captain Pete Johnson was facing a different kind of battle. The Valyrian ground forces had landed 3 days ago, expecting to quickly secure the research facility. Instead, they found themselves fighting through a maze of corridors that seemed to change every few hours. "How are they doing that?" asked Commander Vexstar, the Valyrian ground commander. "They're collapsing sections behind them and opening new passages," his tactical officer explained. "They're turning the entire station into a weapon." The humans had flooded some sections with deadly radiation. Others had been filled with toxic gas or superheated steam. The maintenance tunnels were booby-trapped with improvised explosives. Even the food dispensers had been turned into weapons. "This is madness," Vexstar said. "They're destroying their own facility." "Sir, I don't think they care about the facility anymore. I think they just want to hurt us." Captain Johnson was down to 15 Marines. They had been fighting for 3 days straight, and they were running out of ammunition, food, and hope. But they were not running out of ideas. "Listen up," Johnson told his remaining team. "We're going to show these aliens what humans do when we're backed into a corner." The final battle took place in the station's main laboratory. The Valyrian soldiers found the humans waiting for them in what looked like a last stand. But Johnson had one more surprise. "You want the station?" he called out to the aliens. "Come and take it." The humans opened fire, but their weapons were nearly empty. The Valyrian soldiers advanced, confident that victory was finally within reach. That was when Johnson activated the laboratory's experimental reactor. The explosion was smaller than the one at Kepler 442b, but it was just as final. Europa Station disappeared in a flash of light, taking Johnson's Marines and 200 Valyrian soldiers with it. Across the solar system, similar scenes were playing out. On Titan, Dr. Susan Clark's research team had turned their laboratory into a weapons factory. On Ganymede, the colonial militia was using mining equipment to fight Valyrian battlesuits. On Luna, the defense forces were making the aliens pay for every crater on the moon's surface. The Valyrians were winning every battle, but they were losing something more important. They were losing their confidence. They were losing their certainty. That conquest was simple. Most importantly, they were losing their soldiers. Emperor Zakther watched the reports from his throne room. The conquest of the Sol system was proceeding according to plan, but the casualties were mounting. They had lost more ships and soldiers in 3 days than in their previous 5 conquests combined. The humans refused to surrender, reported Admiral Tishkar. Even when facing certain death, they continue to fight. This is not logical, the Emperor replied. They gain nothing from these sacrifices. 6 months had passed since the war began, and Colonel Don Miller was teaching a group of farmers how to build bombs from fertilizer and household chemicals. The Valyrian Empire controlled most of the outer colonies now, but controlling territory and controlling people were 2 very different things. Remember, Don told the small group gathered in the barn on New Montana, the timer needs to be simple. These aliens have advanced technology, but they don't understand our low-tech solutions. Martha Stevens, who had been growing corn on this planet for 20 years, raised her hand. Colonel, my boy is only 16. Should he be learning this? Dunn looked at the young man standing beside his mother. Bobby Stevens had the same determined look that Dunn had seen in every human settlement across the occupied worlds. Ma'am, the Valyrians don't care how old he is. They see all humans as threats now. Better he knows how to fight back. The resistance movement had grown beyond anything the Valyrians could have imagined. On every occupied world, humans were learning to fight with whatever they could find. Kitchen knives became weapons. Farm equipment became bombs. Children became spies. Major Kate Robinson crouched in the shadows outside a Valyrian supply depot on the planet Haven. She had been watching the alien guards for 3 days, learning their patterns. The Valyrians were efficient and predictable, which made them vulnerable to someone who understood chaos. Kate's team consisted of 5 people, all of them civilians who had lost family in the invasion. They were not soldiers, but grief and anger had turned them into something more dangerous than any army. Remember, Kate whispered into her radio, we're not here to win a battle. We're here to make them afraid to sleep at night. The attack began at midnight. Kate's team hit the supply depot from 4 different directions, using weapons they had built from spare parts and stolen Valyrian technology. The alien guards responded quickly, but they were prepared for a military assault, not for a group of humans who fought like ghosts. By the time Valyrian reinforcements arrived, the depot was in flames and Kate's team had vanished into the night. They had destroyed enough supplies to feed a Valyrian garrison for a month, and they had done it with 6 people and homemade explosives. This was happening on dozens of worlds across the occupied territories. The Valyrians found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not defeat. The resistance cells are multiplying faster than we can eliminate them, reported Commander Velthan to his superior. Every time we destroy one group, 3 more appear. How is this possible? Asked Admiral Tishkar. We have superior weapons and technology. The humans are not fighting like soldiers, sir. They fight like insects. Cut off 1 limb in 2. More grow back. They do not follow any military doctrine we understand. The breaking point came when Captain Alex Turner volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. The Valyrian shipyards in the Proxima Centauri system were building new vessels to replace the losses from the Sol system battles. If those ships reached the front lines, the war would drag on for years. Alex stood before Admiral Patricia Lewis in the briefing room of the hidden base on asteroid XJ419. His small fleet consisted of 12 ships, mostly converted cargo vessels, armed with experimental weapons that Dr. Susan Clark's team had developed from captured Valyrian technology. You understand what you're volunteering for? Admiral Lewis asked. Yes, ma'am. We get 1 shot at this. Either we take out those shipyards or we don't come back. Alex, even if you succeed, the chances of survival are almost 0. Those shipyards are protected by over 300 Valyrian warships, Alex smiled. Admiral, with respect, since when do humans worry about survival when there's a job to do? The mission launched 3 days later. Alex's small fleet jumped into the Proxima Centauri system using stolen Valyrian navigation codes. They appeared in the middle of the shipyard complex before the defenders could react. All ships, this is Captain Turner, Alex broadcast to his fleet. You know what we're here to do? Make it count. The experimental weapons worked better than anyone had hoped. Dr. Clark's fusion charges tore through Valyrian shields like paper, and her cyber warfare programs turned the aliens' advanced computers against them. Within minutes, the main construction facility was in ruins, but the Valyrian response was swift and deadly. Alex watched his ships disappear one by one under the overwhelming firepower of the defense fleet. The UES Courage exploded in a ball of flame. The U's Defiance rammed a Valyrian cruiser and took it down with her. The U's Hope held the line until her reactor overloaded. "Captain Turner," came a voice over the radio. "This is Lieutenant Gary Foster from the UES Reliance. We're the last two ships left." Alex looked at his tactical display. His ship, the UES Destiny, and Foster's ship were all that remained of the task force, but the mission was not complete. The main shipyard was damaged, but still operational. "Gary, I want you to get out of here. Tell them what we accomplished." "Sir, I'm not leaving you here alone." "That's an order, Lieutenant." "Sorry, sir, but I'm not very good at following orders." Alex smiled despite the situation. Even facing certain death, humans refused to abandon each other. The two remaining ships charged the main shipyard together. The Valyrian defenses focused their fire on the larger target, the UES Destiny. Alex's ship was torn apart by enemy weapons, but he managed to guide it into the shipyard's reactor core. The explosion lit up the entire star system. Lieutenant Foster's ship was caught in the blast, but somehow survived. He limped back to human space with news of the mission's success. The Valyrian shipyards were gone. Along with 12 of the finest human ships and their crews, the news of Turner's sacrifice spread throughout human space like wildfire. On Earth, President Helen Carter addressed the global assembly with tears in her eyes. "Captain Turner and his brave crews have shown the galaxy what humanity stands for. They have reminded us that some things are worth dying for." But the real impact of the mission was felt in the Valyrian Empire. Emperor Zakther called an emergency meeting of his war council. The destruction of the Proxima shipyards was a catastrophe that would set back their military production by years. "How did a handful of primitive ships penetrate our defenses?" the Emperor demanded. "They used our own technology against us," Admiral Taishkar explained. "Somehow, they have learned to reverse engineer our weapons and computer systems. That should be impossible. Our technology is centuries ahead of theirs." "Apparently, my lord, human ingenuity is more advanced than we believed." Dr. Susan Clark's research team had indeed accomplished something remarkable. Working from hidden laboratories throughout human space, they had not only figured out how Valyrian technology worked, but had found ways to improve it. Human creativity, combined with desperate necessity, was producing weapons that surprised even their creators. "Sir," reported Dr. Clark to Admiral Rick Stone, "the new fusion bombs are 30% more efficient than the original Valyrian designs, and the cyber warfare programs can shut down their entire fleet if we can get close enough." Admiral Stone studied the technical reports with growing excitement. For the first time since the war began, humanity had weapons that could match Valyrian technology. "How many ships can we equip with these new systems?" "We have enough components for about 50 vessels, sir. After that, we'll need more captured Valyrian technology. Then we'd better start capturing some." The new human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that looked like human designs on the outside carried weapons that blazed with Valyrian energy. The aliens' own technology had been turned against them by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Admiral Stone launched his first major offensive 6 weeks after Turner's sacrifice. His target was the Valyrian fleet that had been occupying the Tau Ceti system. The alien commander, Admiral Kexvar, was confident in his superior numbers and firepower. That confidence lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human ships appeared out of hyperspace in a formation that made no sense according to Valyrian tactical doctrine. They attacked from above and below simultaneously, using three-dimensional thinking that the aliens had never encountered before. The new weapons were devastating. Valyrian shields, designed to stop their own energy weapons, offered no protection against the modified human versions. Ship after ship disappeared in bursts of fusion fire. How are they doing this? Admiral Kexvar demanded of his tactical officer. Sir, their weapons appear to be based on our own technology, but modified in ways we don't understand. They're using harmonics that destabilize our shield matrices? That should be impossible. Apparently, sir, humans have a different definition of impossible than we do. The battle was over in 2 hours. The Valyrian fleet was destroyed, and the Tau Ceti system was free. But more importantly, word of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, on the occupied world of Kepler 438b. The local resistance heard the news and launched a coordinated uprising. On Haven, Major Kate Robinson's sabotage team stepped up their attacks. Across the galaxy, conquered species that had been quietly suffering under Valyrian rule began to wonder if rebellion was possible. Emperor Zakther read the reports in his throne room with growing alarm. The human virus was spreading. 2 years after the first Valyrian ships had appeared in Earth's solar system, Emperor Zakther stood before his war council in a throne room that felt smaller than it used to. The holographic map floating above the council table showed the reality that no one wanted to speak about. Red markers indicated rebellious worlds. Yellow markers showed systems under attack. Green markers representing loyal Valyrian territories were becoming harder to find. Report, the Emperor commanded. Though he already knew what he would hear, Admiral Teshkar stepped forward, his glowing skin dimmer than it had been 2 years ago. My lord, we have lost control of 47 star systems. The rebellion has spread to 14 species across the galaxy. Our military forces are stretched beyond all operational limits. What about the humans? They continue to fight, my lord. General Linda Adams has launched simultaneous attacks across 7 systems. Their new hybrid technology is proving superior to our own designs. The Emperor's 4 eyes closed in what might have been pain. How many ships have we lost? In the past month alone, my lord, we have lost over 300 vessels. The humans are no longer fighting defensively. They are hunting us. General Linda Adams stood on the bridge of the UES Revenge, watching the Valyrian fleet try to escape from the Altair system. Her task force had arrived 6 hours ago, and the aliens were already running. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine when the war began. Admiral Stone, are you seeing this? Linda spoke into her communicator. Admiral Rick Stone's voice crackled back from his flagship in the Centauri sector. I see it, General. Teshkar himself is commanding that retreat. The great Valyrian admiral is running from humans. Linda smiled. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They had tried to fight a war of attrition against a species that had been fighting wars of attrition for thousands of years. Now the Valyrians were learning what it meant to be hunted. All ships, this is General Adams, begin pursuit. Don't let them reach hyperspace. The human fleet moved with deadly precision. The ships looked different now, sleeker and more dangerous than the vessels that had first faced the Valyrian invasion. Dr. Susan Clark's research teams had spent 2 years perfecting the fusion of human and alien technology, creating weapons that were more effective than anything either species had built alone. The lead Valyrian ship, a massive dreadnought that had once seemed invincible, shuddered under the impact of human fusion cannons. Its crystalline armor, designed to deflect Valyrian weapons, cracked and shattered under the modified human fire. Target their engines, Linda ordered. I want them disabled, not destroyed. Ma'am? Asked Captain Greg Martinez from his position at the tactical station. Why not finish them off? Because, Captain, I want them to go back and tell their Emperor what they saw here today. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. The Valyrian fleet was scattered, with most of their ships damaged or destroyed. The few vessels that escaped would carry news of another human victory back to the Empire, but the real victory was happening on the ground. Captain Pete Johnson led his Marines through the corridors of a Valyrian command center on the planet Arcturus Prime. The aliens had abandoned their posts hours ago, leaving behind equipment and intelligence that would help the Human war effort. Sir, called Sergeant Nancy Green from the communications room, you need to see this. Pete walked over to where Nancy was standing in front of a Valyrian computer terminal. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with troop movements and supply. Lines marked in alien script. Can you read it? Pete asked. Some of it, sir, but the important part is clear. They're pulling forces back from the outer territories. They're abandoning entire sectors to concentrate their fleets around their core worlds. Pete studied the map with growing amazement. They're in full retreat. It looks that way, sir. And there's something else. According to this, they've lost contact with fleet commanders in 6 different sectors. Some of their own admirals are going rogue. The Valyrian Empire was not just losing the war, it was falling apart from within. Species that had been conquered centuries ago were remembering what freedom felt like. Valyrian officers, bred for victory and efficiency, were struggling to cope with constant defeat. Emperor Zakthar received the reports in his private chambers. Away from the prying eyes of his council, the numbers were devastating. The Empire had lost more ships in 2 years of fighting humans than in the previous 3 centuries combined, but the ships were not the worst loss. The Empire had lost something more important than vessels or weapons. It had lost its reputation for invincibility. My lord, said Admiral Taishkar, entering the chamber without being announced, we have intercepted communications from the Andromedan Collective. They are mobilizing their fleets. The Emperor's 4 eyes opened wide. The Andromedans have not been seen in this galaxy for 500 years. They say they are coming to study the species that defeated the Valyrian Empire. They want to meet the humans. The Emperor stood up and walked to the great window that showed the capital world of his shrinking empire. In the distance, he could see the lights of the city, but many of the buildings were dark. Resources that once flowed freely from conquered worlds were now needed for the war effort. How many loyal worlds do we still control? 47 star systems, my lord. Less than a quarter of our original territory. And our military strength? We have perhaps 2,000 functional warships remaining. The humans have destroyed or captured the rest. Emperor Zakthar was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Schedule a meeting with the human leadership. We need to discuss terms. Terms, my lord? Terms of surrender. The meeting took place on a neutral space station in the Volf 359 system. Emperor Zakthar arrived with a small escort, a far cry from the massive fleet that had once demanded Earth's submission. General Linda Adams met him in the station's conference room. Accompanied by Admiral Stone and President Helen Carter, the Emperor looked older than he had 2 years ago. His glowing skin was pale, and his 4 eyes showed a weariness that spoke of too many defeats and too many losses. We have come to negotiate the end of hostilities, the Emperor said without preamble. I thought the Valyrian Empire never retreated, General Adams replied. The Valyrian Empire never faced humans before. President Carter leaned forward. What are you offering? Complete withdrawal from all human territories. Recognition of human independence. Reparations for the damage we have caused. And in return? Safe passage for our remaining forces back to Valyrian space. A guarantee that humans will not pursue our fleets beyond the boundaries we establish. Admiral Stone spoke up. Emperor, you're asking us to let you go home and rebuild your empire so you can try this again in a few years. The Emperor's 4 eyes focused on the human admiral. Admiral Stone, I think you misunderstand. There will be no rebuilding. The Valyrian Empire is finished. 14 species have declared independence. Our fleet is scattered across the galaxy. Our industrial capacity is gone. Then why should we agree to anything? Asked General Adams. Because, the Emperor said quietly, you have already won. The question now is whether you want to be remembered as conquerors or as liberators. President Carter exchanged glances with her military commanders. They had spent 2 years fighting a desperate war for survival. The idea that they had not just survived, but won, was still difficult to believe. We'll need guarantees, Carter said finally. Monitoring stations, inspection rights. Complete demilitarization of your remaining territory. Agreed. And one more thing, General Adams added. You're going to help us rebuild the worlds you destroyed. Your people are going to work alongside humans to fix what you broke. The Emperor nodded. It will be done. The treaty was signed 3 days later. Emperor Zakthar affixed his seal to the document that officially ended the Valyrian Empire's expansion and granted independence to every species they had conquered. As the Emperor prepared to leave the station, he stopped to speak with General Adams one last time. General, may I ask you something? What is it, Emperor? When your people first warned us to run, did you know this would happen? Did you know you would win? Linda Adams thought about the question for a moment. Emperor, humans don't fight because we know we can win. We fight because we know we can't lose. I do not understand the difference. That's why you lost. 6 months later, Admiral Jake Martinez stood on the observation deck of the UES Defender, the same ship where he had first seen the Valyrian fleet 2.5 years ago. But this time, the ships approaching Earth carried flags of peace and friendship. The Andromedan Collective had arrived, just as their intercepted messages had promised. Behind them came delegations from a dozen other species, all wanting to meet the humans who had changed the galaxy. Incoming transmission from the lead Andromedan vessel, reported Lieutenant Cooper. Put it through, Jake ordered. The screen showed a being unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The Andromedan appeared to be made of living starlight, constantly shifting and flowing like a small galaxy contained in a humanoid form. Greetings, humans of Earth. I am Starsinger Melodic Thought and Harmony. We have traveled far to meet the species that taught the galaxy a new way to think about war and peace. Welcome to Earth, Jake replied.